And finally, a special announcement. The sound of my husband's voice, amplified by the microphone, cut through the low hum of polite conversation. Richard tapped a champagne flute with a dinner knife. A clear ringing sound that made everyone turn. We were at the Pine Ridge Country Club, a place that smelled of old money and fresh pine, celebrating my 70th birthday. Or so I thought. He beamed, a politician's smile perfected over 4 decades, sweeping his gaze across our friends, our colleagues, our 2 children, David and Sarah, and their families. They all smiled back, glasses raised in anticipation. Then his eyes found me. They stopped. The warmth vanished from them, replaced by something I had never seen before. A cold, hard gleam of triumph. It was the look of a hunter standing over his prize. My own smile faltered. My hand, resting on the white linen tablecloth, suddenly felt cold. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. Something was wrong. The air in the opulent ballroom grew thick, heavy. He gestured to the side of the room, near the grand entrance. A young woman I'd never seen before stepped forward, holding the hand of a small boy, perhaps 5 or 6 years old. She was beautiful in that effortlessly modern way, with long blonde hair and a dress that cost more than my first car. The boy clutched a small toy truck, looking overwhelmed by the sea of faces. "I'd like you all to meet Chloe," Richard announced, his voice booming with false sincerity. "And my son Leo. My son." The words didn't register at first. They floated in the air, nonsensical syllables. A collective gasp, sharp and sudden, rippled through the room. I saw our daughter Sarah's hand fly to her mouth. David just stared, his face a pale blank mask. Richard's gaze returned to me, pinning me to my seat. There was no apology in his eyes. Only a final, devastating declaration. "They are the true future of the Sterling family," he said, his voice dropping to a low, deliberate tone. "And as of today, my marriage to Lillian is over." The world tilted. The sounds of the room dissolved into a dull, roaring static in my ears. I could see mouths moving, but I couldn't hear the whispers. I could see the shock on the faces of people I had known for 30 years, but I couldn't feel their pity. All I could see was Richard, standing there like a king pronouncing a decree. He wasn't finished. He took a small step forward, leaning into the microphone as if to share a secret with the entire room. "She has 24 hours to vacate my property. My property. Not our home. My property." Silence. A complete, suffocating silence that was louder than any scream. No one moved. No one spoke. The only thing I could feel was the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on me, watching me shatter. On the table in front of me, my birthday cake sat. A 3-tiered masterpiece from the best bakery in Aspen Springs. Its 70 candles remained unlit. They would never be lit now. The wax figures of a happy, elderly couple on top suddenly looked like a grotesque mockery. The ride home was a descent into a new kind of hell. Richard drove the Mercedes, the car I had picked out, the one with the soft leather seats I loved. He didn't speak a single word to me. He didn't even look at me. The man I had shared a bed with for 45 years, the father of my children, treated me as if I were a piece of luggage he was transporting. His phone screen cast a pale, blue light on his face. A small, self-satisfied smile played on his lips as he scrolled. I saw a notification pop up on the screen from across the console. Instagram. A picture of him and the woman Chloe at the party. They were smiling, her head on his shoulder. He looked happier than I had seen him look in years. The caption was a stake through my heart. The start of our forever. My own phone lay silent in my purse. I kept expecting it to buzz. A text from Sarah asking if I was okay. A call from David furious on my behalf. But there was nothing. Not a single message. It was as if I had ceased to exist the moment Richard spoke those final words. My children, my own flesh and blood, had watched me be publicly executed and had chosen to look away. The silence from them was more painful than Richard's cruelty. It was a confirmation. I was alone. We pulled into the long winding driveway of our home. The house I had designed. Every brick, every window, Every sprawling oak tree in the yard was a part of a life I had meticulously built. For us. For our family. But tonight it looked like a stranger's house. The lights were on, casting a warm, inviting glow, but it felt cold and menacing. Richard put the car in park and finally turned to me. His expression was one of mild impatience, as if I were a tedious chore he needed to finish. He didn't get out of the car. He just pointed towards the small, detached building at the edge of the property, the guest house. "Your things will be moved there for tonight," he said, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. "A few suitcases, essentials. The movers will be here for the rest tomorrow." I couldn't form words. A protest died in my throat. I just stared at him, trying to find a trace of the man I had married. There was nothing left. Only this cold, calculating stranger. He seemed to read my thoughts. "Don't go into the main house," he warned, his voice hardening. "Don't touch anything. It's being professionally redecorated. A fresh start. A fresh start. For him. For Chloe. For his new son. Our life was just old decor to be stripped out and thrown away. The finality of it was absolute. I wasn't just being divorced, I was being erased." He got out of the car, leaving the door open for me, and walked towards the front door of the main house without a backward glance. He didn't offer to help me. He didn't say goodbye. He just left me sitting in the passenger seat of our car, in the driveway of our home, under the cold, indifferent stars. My body moved on its own. I stepped out of the car, my legs unsteady. The crisp mountain air felt like ice against my skin. I watched him unlock the front door and disappear inside, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind him, a final definitive sound. I walked the 100 yards to the guest house on numb feet. It was a place we kept for visitors, beautifully appointed but always impersonal. The door was unlocked. Inside, just as he'd said, were 3 of my suitcases, neatly lined up against the wall. A small bag of toiletries sat on the bedside table. It was the kind of temporary, soulless arrangement you'd find in a hotel. I didn't turn on any more lights. I walked to the large picture window that overlooked the main house. It was ablaze with light. I could see Richard's silhouette moving from room to room. A few minutes later, another car pulled up. A sporty little convertible. Chloe got out. She ran to the front door and Richard opened it for her. He pulled her into an embrace, a long, passionate kiss right there on the doorstep of my home. My home. I stood there in the darkness of the guest house, a ghost watching a life that was no longer mine. The numbness that had protected me at the party began to recede, and in its place, a pain so sharp and so profound it stole my breath. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the demolition of my entire world, conducted by the one man I thought would always protect it. And my children, the 2 people I had built that world for, were letting him swing the wrecking ball. My name is Lillian. I'm 70 years old, though in the cold silence of this guest house, I feel every single one of those years like a separate layer of frost. Before I was Richard Sterling's wife, before my name was just an elegant suffix to his, I was Lillian Vance. I remember her. I remember the feeling of a drafting pencil in my hand, the satisfying grit of graphite on vellum, the scent of fresh blueprints that smelled like possibility. I was an architectural designer, and they said I had a gift. I saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. A series of lines and spaces waiting to be arranged into something beautiful, something functional, something that felt like home. My father, a man whose love was as solid and unyielding as the steel he sold, saw that gift in me. He was a shrewd businessman, protective to a fault. I remember sitting in his heavy oak-paneled office, the air thick with the smell of leather and old paper. He presented me with a portfolio. "This is yours, Lily," he'd said, his voice a low rumble. "It's not just money. It's a foundation. Don't ever let a man be the only roof over your head. You build your own." It was a substantial inheritance, a launching pad. But more than that, it was his blessing. When I met Richard, he was all charisma and ambition, a whirlwind of promises and dazzling smiles. He was going to change the world, he said, and I believed him. I loved him with the fierce, unthinking totality of youth. I used my father's seed money, But it was my vision that truly built our fortune. I had an eye for undervalued land, a knack for seeing the potential in a dilapidated structure. I'd walk a property and feel its bones, its history, its future. I designed our first home from the ground up, a sprawling colonial revival that became the talk of Aspen Springs. I managed the investments, turning my inheritance into a dynasty. I curated the art collections, choosing each piece not for its price tag, but for the story it told. Our life was a masterpiece of my own design. But Richard's political career began to grow, and a shadow fell over my work. "A man in my position needs a wife, Lily, not a business partner," he'd said one evening, his tone gentle, persuasive. "It looks better. More traditional. People trust a man whose wife is dedicated to his home, to his family." He framed it as a strategy, a necessary sacrifice for our shared future. And I, so blinded by love and the dream we were building, agreed. I stepped back. I let him put his name on the accounts. I let him be the face of our success, the man everyone admired for his Midas touch. I became the quiet support system, the ghost in the machine. Lillian Vance, the architect, was carefully packed away in an attic of memory, and Mrs. Richard Sterling took her place. For so long I thought that was what love was, a willing, graceful erasure of the self. I see now, in the harsh light of this betrayal, that I wasn't just in love. I was a fool. For 45 years I played my part to perfection. I was the quintessential political wife. It was a role more demanding than any architectural project I had ever undertaken. The blueprints were unwritten. The materials were people's egos and ambitions, and the foundation was a series of carefully maintained illusions. I hosted fundraisers in our home, the one I had designed, and smiled as people complimented Richard on his impeccable taste. I'd spend weeks planning every detail, from the floral arrangements that conveyed a message of understated power to the seating charts that were a masterclass in political diplomacy. I could charm the most stubborn donors, remembering the names of their children and their pet projects, making them feel seen and important. All the while, Richard would stand by the fireplace, accepting the praise as if he'd orchestrated it all himself. I learned to ignore his indiscretions. The first time, it was a faint scent of unfamiliar perfume on his suit jacket. My heart had hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird. But I said nothing. I simply sent the suit to the dry cleaners. Then came the late nights he explained away as strategy meetings, the single earring I found tucked in the seat of his car, the hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Each one was a small crack in the facade, and my job was to be the plaster, smoothing over the imperfections so no one else would see them. I told myself it was for the greater good, for his career, for our family, for the stable, beautiful world I had built for our children. Our life in Aspen Springs wasn't just a life. It was a campaign, a carefully constructed stage set of wealth and influence, and the show had to go on. Our children, David and Sarah, grew up on that stage. They never saw the blueprints. They never knew about the late nights I spent poring over market reports, or the shrewd real estate deals I made through a proxy. They only saw the finished product. A father who was a titan, a force of nature who seemed to conjure wealth from thin air, and a mother who organized lovely dinners and made sure their homework was done. They saw his booming voice and my quiet efficiency, and they drew the conclusions anyone would. They mistook his performance for power, and my silence for dependence. I remember one afternoon when David was a teenager, struggling with a complex geometry problem. I sat with him, and in 20 minutes I'd sketched out a solution, explaining the spatial logic in a way his teacher hadn't. He stared at me, his eyes wide with surprise. "Wow, Mom," he said. "I didn't know you were smart like that." The words were meant as a compliment, but they landed like a stone in my heart. He didn't know. How could he? I had never shown him. Later, when Sarah was applying to colleges, she listed her father's accomplishments on her applications, his business ventures, his civic leadership. Under the section for my occupation, she simply wrote homemaker. It was the truth, but it wasn't the whole truth. It was the label for the role I had chosen, and I had played it so well that even my own children believed it was all I was. They loved me, I know they did, but they loved a character. They loved the gentle, unassuming wife of the great Richard Sterling, never suspecting that the wife was the one who had drawn the plans for his entire kingdom. That was my greatest design, and my most tragic failure. I had built a beautiful, sturdy house of cards, and I was living inside it, waiting for the first gust of wind. The sound was the first violation. Not a shout, not an argument, but a high-pitched, grating whine of hard plastic wheels on polished Italian marble. It was a sound my house had never known. From the window of the guest house, which now felt more like a cell, I watched them arrive. Chloe, all bright white teeth and a bouncing blonde ponytail, directed movers with the imperious wave of a hand, as if she were a queen returning to her ancestral castle. And then there was Leo, her son, a whirlwind of energy on a bright blue scooter, the source of that terrible noise. He was carving tracks across the floor I had personally selected from a quarry in Tuscany 40 years ago, a floor I had seen laid tile by painful tile. Richard was nowhere to be seen. He had facilitated the invasion and then vanished, leaving his proxy to conquer the territory. My home, the one I had designed from the ground up, the silent testament to my life's work, became her content farm overnight. The library, my sanctuary filled with the comforting scent of old paper and leather, was the first to fall. I saw it through the glare of my small tablet screen. She propped her phone against a stack of first edition Hemingways and was live streaming to thousands of strangers. "Hey besties. Welcome back," she chirped, her voice echoing unnaturally in the acoustically perfect room. "We're chilling in the super old school library today. So much dead tree stuff, lol." She picked up a leather-bound copy of The Sun Also Rises, holding it upside down. "Look at this one. Heman gay? Is that how you say it? Super vintage vibes." A stream of emojis flowed up her screen. No one corrected her. They just sent her little digital hearts and flames. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. She wasn't just ignorant. She was proud of it. She was turning my temple of thought into a backdrop for vapid digital noise. The next day it was my walk-in closet. The closet I had designed with cedar lining and specialized compartments for every accessory. She filmed an outfit of the day video in there. Her back to my collection of gowns and tailored suits. She pulled out a silk scarf, a gift from Richard on our 20th anniversary. "Thinking of using this as a headband," she mused to her phone. "Or maybe a belt for my ripped jeans. Kinda gives off that rich grandma look, you know?" She giggled, a sound like glass breaking, and tossed it onto a pile on the floor. She was touching my life, my memories, and smearing her cheap, transient world all over them. Leo was her little accomplice in chaos. I'd watch him from my window, a tiny ghost haunting my own life. He was allowed to do anything as long as it was content. Chloe would follow him with her phone, cheering as he rode his scooter down the grand hallway, the one with the soaring ceilings and the art I had collected over decades. "Go faster, baby," she'd yell, her voice shrill. He would swerve, his plastic wheels screeching, coming inches from a Ming Dynasty vase I'd acquired at a Sotheby's auction. My heart would leap into my throat, but Chloe would just laugh and add a filter to the video, captioning it, "My little daredevil. Boy mom luxury life." She wasn't raising a son, she was producing a prop. She taught him that nothing was precious, that everything was disposable, a temporary amusement. I once saw her hand him a priceless porcelain figurine from the mantelpiece to play with. "Don't break it, sweetie," she'd cooed, her eyes on her phone screen. "Mommy needs a cute pic for the gram." The days bled into a monotonous loop of quiet degradation. I wasn't Lillian anymore. To the new staff Chloe had hired, I was just the old woman in the back. My meals were a clear indicator of my new status. They weren't brought by a housekeeper who would ask how I was doing. They were simply left. A styrofoam box on the cold flagstone step outside the guest house door, usually long after the main house had finished their dinner. I'd open it to find the greasy, lukewarm remnants of whatever takeout they'd ordered. A half-eaten bucket of KFC, a few limp fries, a single sad biscuit. I was being fed like a stray dog, an animal they didn't want but were obligated to keep alive. I would eat sitting on the edge of the stiff, unfamiliar bed in the guest house, using a plastic fork. My own silverware, the heavy, ornate sterling silver with our family monogram, was likely being used by Chloe to feed Leo chicken nuggets while she live-streamed their dinner. Some nights I couldn't eat. I would just stare at the food, the insult of it, and feel a hunger so deep it had nothing to do with my stomach. It was a hunger for dignity. Then came the video. It appeared on my feed one afternoon, posted to Chloe's ridiculously popular TikTok account. The title was Spring Cleaning. Sparkles, the camera, propped on my bedroom dresser, was pointed at my open closet. Chloe was there humming a pop song, wearing a pair of my silk pajamas as a joke, the bottoms rolled up and the top hanging off her shoulder. Beside her were 3 large, black industrial-strength trash bags. With a performative laugh for her audience, she began to pull my clothes from their hangers. She pulled out the navy blue St. John knit suit I wore to my son David's graduation from law school. She held it up, wrinkling her nose. "EU shoulder pads," she said to the camera, and with a dramatic flourish stuffed it into the bag. Next was the cashmere sweater set I'd worn home from the hospital with my daughter Sarah. She balled it up without a second glance. Gowns, blouses, slacks, 45 years of my life, of my identity as a wife, a mother, a woman were reduced to garbage. She filled one bag, then another, her movements quick and brutal. When she was done, she tied the last bag with a flourish and blew a kiss at the phone. The caption she wrote burned itself into my memory. "Out with the old, in with the new. Winking face with tongue upgraded, New Beginnings by Felicia." My thumb trembled as I scrolled through the comments. Thousands of them. Laughing emojis. "Yes, queen, get rid of that dusty old stuff. His ex-wife must be so mad, lol." Each word was a tiny shard of glass under my skin, but it was when I scrolled up to the top of the post that my breath truly left my body. Right below the video, next to the little heart icon, was a list of names. And I saw it, clear as day. Sarah Sterling and 237,451 others like this. Sarah. My daughter. My baby girl. She had seen that video. She had watched a stranger throw her mother's life into a trash bag. And she had liked it. She had clicked a little digital heart to approve of my erasure. The pain was physical. It was a spear through my chest, twisting and turning. It was a betrayal so profound, so modern, that I had no frame of reference for it. It was worse than any argument, any cruel word spoken to my face. It was a quiet public endorsement of my humiliation. I dropped the tablet onto the floor. The screen didn't crack, but I felt something inside me shatter into a million irreparable pieces. For a week after that, a heavy silence settled over me. The world outside the guest house window seemed to be moving in a different dimension. The food trays continued to appear. The sound of the scooter continued to echo. The high-pitched laughter from the main house was a constant, mocking soundtrack to my grief. I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of a life that was no longer mine. The Wi-Fi password for the main house was changed without notice, cutting off my primary link to the outside world. The cable TV in the guest house went dead. The message was clear. I was not only to be unseen, but unheard and uninformed. I was being systematically unplugged from the world I had built. One evening, a knock came at the guest house door. My heart gave a foolish little leap. Maybe it was Sarah coming to explain, to apologize. I opened the door. It was David, my son. He stood there in a perfectly tailored suit, the kind I used to buy for him. He looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting everywhere but at my face. He wasn't carrying flowers or a comforting word. He was carrying a leather briefcase. "Mom," he said, his voice flat, devoid of warmth. He stepped inside without being invited, placing the briefcase on the small, rickety table. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't comment on the sparse, impersonal room. He didn't mention the video. He unclipped the latches on the briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers, bound in a neat blue folder. He laid them on the table between us. The top page read, "Durable Power of Attorney." "Mom," he began again, adopting a tone of strained patience, the one lawyers use when they're explaining something to a simpleton. Dad's worried about you. He says you're not well. That this whole thing has been a lot for you to process." I just stared at him, at the son whose face I knew better than my own. I saw the faint scar above his eyebrow from when he fell off his bike at age 7. I saw the set of his jaw, so much like Richard's, but his eyes were a stranger's. He thinks it would be best if you just signed over power of attorney, David continued, pushing the papers an inch closer to me. Just to make things easier. For everyone. He can manage everything. You won't have to worry about the finances, the properties, any of it. The air left my lungs. He wasn't here to comfort me. He was an emissary sent to finish the job. They had taken my home, my dignity, and now they were coming for my autonomy. For my name. My voice when it came out was a dry rasp. No. David sighed, a sound of deep annoyance. He ran a hand through his hair. Mom, don't be difficult. It's for your own good. You're emotional right now. You're not thinking clearly. I am thinking perfectly clearly, David, I said, my voice gaining a sliver of the steel it once had. I will not sign those papers. His face hardened. The mask of feigned concern fell away, revealing the cold ambition underneath. You're being selfish, he snapped. The word hit me like a slap. First Sarah's digital betrayal, now this. Selfish. For wanting to keep the last shred of control over my own life. You're only thinking about yourself. Dad is trying to build a new life, a new family. He's trying to protect his assets for Leo. You're standing in the way of that. Just sign the papers and let everyone move on. He saw the look on my face. He knew he had lost. He snatched the papers off the table, stuffing them back into his briefcase. He walked to the door without another word. His hand was on the knob when he turned back, his expression one of pure contempt. You brought this on yourself, he said, and then he was gone. The word selfish hung in the air after he left, thick and suffocating like smoke. It was a brand, seared onto the last remaining piece of my heart that I thought was safe. The betrayal of a child is a unique kind of pain. It hollows you out from the inside, leaving nothing but a fragile shell. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, the silence of the guest house roaring in my ears. The next morning, as a pale gray light filtered through the window, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was an old phone, a simple one, but it was still connected to our bank's alert system. I picked it up, my hands trembling. It was a notification from Sterling Financial, a transaction confirmation. My eyes scanned the impersonal text. My heart pounded a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. Transfer confirmation. A wire transfer in the amount of $15 million has been successfully processed from your joint investment account, ending in -$4,821. $15 million. It was the entire balance. Everything. Decades of careful investment, of planning, of my own inheritance folded into our shared future. It was our security. Our legacy. Gone. My eyes fell to the final line of the notification. The one that detailed the destination of the funds. The one that sealed the coffin on the life I once knew. Recipient. The Leo Sterling Trust. He hadn't just taken the money. He had taken my name, my husband's name, and given it to his new heir, cementing my replacement. It wasn't just a financial transaction. It was a declaration. I had been fully and finally excised. I was nothing. A ghost with an empty account. I sat there on the edge of the bed, the phone screen glowing in the dim light, and I felt the last bit of hope drain out of me, leaving a cold, terrifying void. This wasn't just the bottom. It was a grave they had dug for me, and they had just finished shoveling the dirt. The notification on my phone was not a sound of defeat. It was a bell tolling, a sound that sliced through 45 years of fog. $15 million. The number was so absurd, so obscene it didn't feel real. It was a digital ghost, a phantom of betrayal. But as I stared at the sterile text of the bank alert, it didn't ignite despair. It ignited a memory. The cold, hard clarity of it was a shock, like diving into an icy lake. I wasn't in the sterile guest house anymore. I was 24 years old, sitting in my father's study. The air smelled of old leather, lemon polish, and the faint, sweet scent of his pipe tobacco. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, catching dust motes dancing in the air. It was a week before my wedding to Richard. A week before I became Lillian Sterling and began the slow process of erasing Lillian Vance. My father, a man of few words but immense presence, slid a thick leather-bound folio across his mahogany desk. The sound it made was a soft, authoritative thud. His hands were strong, the knuckles slightly swollen with arthritis, but his movements were precise. "Lillian," he said. His voice was not warm, but it was firm, a foundation. It was the voice that had always defined reality for me. "Listen to me carefully. In 1 week you will be a Sterling. But you will always be a Vance first. Remember that." I reached out and touched the cool leather. It was embossed with gold lettering, but I couldn't read it from my angle. "What is this, Daddy?" He tapped the cover with a single definitive finger. "This is your protection. It's a trust. It contains every dollar your grandfather left me, and every dollar I have ever made. It will contain the deed to the land you will build your house on. It contains everything." He leaned forward, his gaze pinning me in place. "Richard will be on the account. He will manage the funds, make the investments, handle the day-to-day business. He is a charming man and he is ambitious. That ambition needs to be fueled. But this," his voice dropped to a near whisper, a tone he reserved for unshakable truths, "this is important. He will have control, but he will never ever have ownership. Do you understand me, Lillian? The ownership is yours and yours alone. He is a steward, not a king." The memory was so vivid I could almost feel the weight of that folio in my hands again. The Lillian Vance Sterling Trust. An irrevocable trust. My father had repeated the words until they were branded into my mind. I was the sole beneficiary. Richard was merely the managing signatory. For 45 years, I had allowed that fact to sleep, buried under a mountain of wifely duties, social obligations, and the carefully constructed fiction that Richard was the sole architect of our lives. The $15 million transfer wasn't a theft from a joint account. It was a violation of a sacred duty. It was a breach. And in that cold, silent guest house, I finally understood the weapon my father had left me. My first call was to a number I knew by heart, the number for the law firm that had handled our family's affairs for half a century. Mr. Gable. His voice was exactly as I remembered it from countless holiday parties and charity galas, a little reedy, a little too eager to please. "Lillian, my dear, how are you holding up? I heard about the unfortunate events at the party. Simply dreadful." His sympathy felt thin, rehearsed. I cut through the pleasantries. My voice was level, colder than I intended. "Mr. Gable, I need to activate my rights as the sole beneficiary of the Lillian Vance Sterling Trust. Richard has made an unauthorized transfer of a significant sum." There was a silence on the line. I could hear a faint rustling of papers, a nervous clearing of his throat. The confidence in his voice evaporated, replaced by a hesitant, tiptoeing tone. "Lillian, now let's not be hasty. This is a very complex situation." "It's not complex at all," I stated. "He transferred $15 million to an account for his mistress's son. He has no right to do that. The trust is mine." "Well, yes, technically on paper," he stammered, "but we must consider the practicalities. Richard has managed and, significantly grown those assets for over 4 decades. A court would almost certainly view his contributions as a valid claim on the marital estate. His name has been on everything. The optics, Lillian, the optics." His words were meant to sound wise and cautious, but all I heard was fear. He wasn't advising me. He was warning me. He was afraid of Richard. He was afraid of the man who signed his retainer checks, the man who invited him to play golf at the club, the man with political connections that could make or break a small law practice. "Perhaps," he continued, his voice regaining a slippery, placating smoothness, "we could arrange a meeting, negotiate a settlement. A generous one, of course. Something that allows you to live comfortably without burning everything to the ground. A contentious divorce at your age." "Mr. Gable," I interrupted, the ice in my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Whose lawyer are you?" The question hung in the air between us. He sputtered. "Why, I'm the family lawyer, of course. I have always." "No," I said, the realization settling in my gut like a stone. "You are Richard's lawyer. You have always been Richard's lawyer. I was just part of the family package he paid for." "Lillian, that is unfair. I am merely trying to protect you from a long, painful, and likely unsuccessful legal battle. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Gable," I said, my voice utterly devoid of emotion. "You're fired." I ended the call before he could respond. The silence in the room was profound. My hand was shaking not from fear, but from a surge of adrenaline I hadn't felt in years. It was the first decision I had made entirely for myself, without consultation or consideration for Richard's comfort, in a very, very long time. It felt like breathing after being held underwater. The internet became my only window to the outside world, and through it I found her. Anya Sharma. Her website was minimalist and modern. Her photo showed a woman in her late 30s with sharp, intelligent eyes that held no hint of apology. Her biography was short and to the point. Complex asset litigation. Fearless advocacy. There was no mention of amicable settlements or negotiating from a place of weakness. I hired her over a video call that same afternoon. Anya was the antithesis of Mr. Gable. She listened to my entire story without interruption, her expression unreadable. She didn't offer platitudes or sympathy. When I finished, she simply said, "He made a mistake. A big one. Greed makes men sloppy. We can use that." As Anya and her team began the painstaking work of gathering documents and building our case, Chloe launched her counteroffensive. It was a war fought not in a courtroom, but on the glowing screens of millions of strangers. She weaponized her youth, her carefully constructed vulnerability, and her son. The video started appearing on TikTok and Instagram. Chloe sitting in my living room on my sofa, with tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. The lighting was soft, flattering. A sad, gentle piano track played in the background. "I don't know what to do," she'd whisper to her phone, her voice cracking. "We were so happy. Richard was finally free to be with his family, with his son." The camera would pan to little Leo, playing on my Persian rug with a new expensive-looking toy truck. And now, she's trying to take everything. Not just from me, but from this innocent little boy. She never used my name. I was always her or his ex-wife. I was a shadowy figure of immense cruelty, a bitter old crone intent on destroying a young family out of spite. She posted a photo of a single, wilting rose in a vase. The caption read, "Some people just want to watch beautiful things die. Broken heart family first." Then came the hashtag, Justice for Leo. It was a stroke of evil genius. It trended on Twitter within hours, fueled by an army of her followers and, Anya suspected, a significant number of purchase bots. The comments were a torrent of vitriol. "Gold-digging old hag. Let the man be happy. That poor little boy doesn't deserve this. What kind of monster tries to disinherit a child?" My own daughter Sarah, who hadn't called me once, liked a post where Chloe claimed I had never truly loved Richard. That single digital tap of a finger felt like a physical blow. The war spilled over from the virtual world into the real one. News vans, vultures in white panel vans with satellite dishes on top, began parking outside the estate gates. Reporters with microphones shouted questions at the delivery drivers and landscapers. I was a prisoner in the guest house, the curtains drawn, watching my own character assassination play out on a global stage. Anya had warned me it would be ugly, but I hadn't understood. They weren't just trying to take my money. They were trying to erase my humanity, painting me as a vindictive caricature to justify their own greed. The first official legal meeting was held in a neutral conference room downtown. The air was thick with tension and the smell of expensive coffee. I sat beside Anya, my back ramrod straight. Across the polished table sat Richard and his new lawyer, a man named Marcus Thorne who had the predatory smile of a shark. Richard wouldn't look at me. He just stared at a point on the wall just over my head, a mask of weary indignation on his face. Thorne began with a series of condescending speeches about Richard's decades of brilliant financial stewardship and the emotional distress his client was suffering. Anya let him talk, her face impassive, her fingers steepled under her chin. Finally, Thorne slid a document across the table. "And this," he said with a dramatic flourish, "renders this entire discussion moot." It was a single page, a legal addendum dated 15 years prior. It was titled Co-Beneficiary Grant to the Lillian Vance Sterling Trust. It appeared to grant Richard equal status as a beneficiary, not just a manager. And at the bottom, clear as day, was my signature. Lillian Vance Sterling. A cold dread so powerful it was nauseating washed over me. I stared at the signature. It was mine. I knew it was. And then the memory surfaced, hazy and unsettling. A frantic Tuesday afternoon. Richard rushing into the kitchen, his tie askew. He'd dropped a thick stack of papers on the island where I was arranging flowers. "Honey, I'm late for a flight. Just need you to sign these tax forms. Right here, here, and here." He tapped the pages with his pen. I was distracted, worried about a caterer for an upcoming fundraiser. I remembered the scent of the lilies, the feel of his pen in my hand, the pressure of his hand on my shoulder, hurrying me along. "Just sign here, honey." I had signed without reading a single word. A wave of self-loathing crashed over me. 45 years of quiet competence, of managing a household, a family, and a political image, all undone by one moment of careless wifely trust. My own stupidity was about to cost me everything. "As you can see," Thorne said, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction, "Mrs. Sterling granted my client co-beneficiary status years ago. His transfer of funds, while perhaps indelicate in its timing, was perfectly within his legal rights as an owner of the trust." Richard finally looked at me, a flicker of triumph in his eyes. He thought he had one. I felt the air leave my lungs. All this fight, all this pain for nothing. But Anya didn't flinch. She picked up the document, holding it up to the light. She examined it for a long, silent moment. She slid a finger over the signature. I wanted to scream at her to stop, to not prolong the agony. The signature was mine. The mistake was mine. Then she placed the document back on the table and looked at me. Her eyes were sharp, analytical, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something that looked like excitement. "This is a high-quality forgery, Lillian," she said, her voice low but clear, cutting through the smug atmosphere in the room. Thorne's smile faltered. Richard's face tightened. "That's a ludicrous accusation," Thorne blustered. "Is it?" Anya leaned forward. "The signature is excellent. A near-perfect imitation of your handwriting from that period, Lillian. But it was made with a ballpoint pen that uses a gel-based ink formula that wasn't commercially available until 2011. This document is dated 2008. She tapped the paper. "Furthermore, a microscopic analysis will show the pressure indentations are uniform, characteristic of a careful trace rather than a natural signature, which has variations in pressure on the upstrokes and downstrokes. It's good. Very good. But it's not perfect. We can fight this." A single fragile tendril of hope unfurled in my chest. It was a long shot, a battle of experts and affidavits, but it wasn't the closed door I had just imagined. It was a crack of light. Richard had overplayed his hand. In his arrogance, he hadn't just relied on my trust. He had committed a felony. The battle over the forged signature would be long and expensive. A war of attrition. But Anya argued we needed to attack from another front. We needed the original trust charter, the leather-bound folio my father had given me, which had been lodged in a secure vault at the main downtown bank branch since the week before my wedding. We needed to see the original ink, the original signatures, the exact wording my father had insisted upon. The bank vault was a world of its own. It was cold, silent, and smelled of steel and recycled air. A stern-faced bank employee with a name tag that read Mr. Harrison led us through a series of thick, circular doors into a private viewing room. He placed a long, heavy metal box on the table and with a final procedural nod, left us alone, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. Anya opened the box. Inside, nestled in aged velvet, was the folio. My hands trembled as I lifted it out. The leather was still supple, the gold embossing of my family crest still bright. It felt like a relic from another life, a message from a ghost. Anya put on a pair of white cotton gloves and began to carefully turn the thick, creamy pages. The text was dense, a forest of legal terminology, clauses and subclauses, articles and sections. She read with an unnerving focus, her finger tracing each line, her lips moving silently. I sat opposite her, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The silence stretched on. 10 minutes. 20. The only sound was the soft rustle of the turning pages. My hope began to fade, replaced by the familiar gnawing of anxiety. Perhaps my memory was wrong. Perhaps my father's words were just the reassurances of a worried parent, not legally binding iron. And then Anya stopped. Her finger froze on a paragraph near the end of the document. She didn't say anything. She just read it again. And then a third time. She looked up at me, and her professional mask was gone. In its place was a look of pure, unadulterated shock, and a smile, a slow, dangerous smile, was spreading across her face. "Oh, you magnificent old man," she whispered to the air. "You brilliant, magnificent bastard." She turned the folio around so I could read it. Her finger pointed to a section at the very end. It was titled, Codicil. An addendum. My father's final, secret act of protection, added just days before the trust was finalized. The language was precise, unambiguous, and utterly ruthless. It stated that if the managing signatory, Richard, ever transferred, gifted, or otherwise directed any asset, liquid or fixed, from the trust principal to a non-lineal descendant of Lillian Vance, then all his rights as managing signatory, all access to all accounts, and all powers of attorney associated with the trust would be, and I could hear my father's voice in the words, immediately and irrevocably terminated. It got worse. Or for me better. To be valid, any such transfer would have required my explicit consent. Not just any consent. It had to be my wedding signature, notarized on a specific separate document referenced only as Form 11B Vance. A form that, Anya confirmed with a quick flip through the file, did not exist. It was a trap. A poison pill my father had buried deep in the legal code, waiting for decades. Richard, in his greedy haste to secure a future for his new family, had just transferred $15 million to his illegitimate son. He hadn't just forged a signature. He hadn't just committed a breach of trust. He had, with his own signature on the wire transfer, pulled the pin on his own financial grenade. He had signed his own death warrant that I played the part of the defeated woman, and I played it to perfection. My world shrank to the four walls of the guest house, a space I had once designed for visiting dignitaries and friends, now my gilded cage. I stopped trying the door to the main house. I stopped making calls that would go unanswered. I let the silence settle into my bones, becoming a shroud I could pull around myself. From the outside, I was a ghost haunting the edges of my own life. A wilted flower, forgotten in a vase. That was the performance. The reality was a fire banked low, its embers glowing with a heat that was patient and absolute. My grief was real, a hollow ache in my chest that caught me unawares at dawn and dusk. But it was no longer a debilitating fog. It had crystallized into a lens sharp and clear, through which I saw everything. I became a student of their new life. The large picture window in the guesthouse living room, overlooking the pool and the sprawling back lawn I had landscaped myself, became my theater. I watched them perform their victory. The first weekend they threw a pool party. The bass from the speakers vibrated through the floorboards, a constant dull thud against my ribs. I saw Chloe, impossibly young and lithe in a neon bikini, laughing as she was thrown into the pool by one of Richard's new younger colleagues. I saw my husband of 45 years, looking on with a fatuous doting grin, the kind he hadn't given me in decades. He looked rejuvenated, but it was a cheap, superficial gloss. Underneath, I could see the strain, the desperate need to keep up with the youth he had purchased. I saw my son David there. He stood awkwardly at the edge of the crowd, nursing a beer, trying to look like he belonged. He didn't speak to Richard much. He was there as a prop, a testament to Richard's virility and supposed family values. Sarah wasn't present. Perhaps even she had a line she wouldn't cross. Or perhaps she was simply busy. I didn't let myself hope. Hope was a luxury I could not yet afford. Days bled into a week, then two. My meals appeared on a tray left outside the guest house door, usually leftovers from their lavish dinners, delivered by a maid who wouldn't meet my eyes. I ate what I needed to survive, my palate numb to the taste of expensive food that had turned to ash in my mouth. I let them see me through the window, a small stooped figure in a gray cardigan, reading a book or simply staring into space. I wanted them to see weakness. I wanted them to believe I was fading away, a relic of a past they had successfully erased. The deliveries were the most galling. One afternoon, a flatbed truck arrived, and with great ceremony, a gleaming white Maserati was unloaded. Chloe squealed, a sound that pierced the quiet afternoon air, and threw her arms around Richard. She posted a video of it almost instantly, I was sure. The caption would be something clever and cruel. I watched Richard hand her the keys, his face beaming with the pride of a man who believed he had bought happiness, bought youth, bought a new life. He didn't understand. He hadn't bought anything. He was merely a tenant in a house I had built, using money I had provided, living a life I had architected. He was a king ruling a kingdom of sand, and he had no idea the tide was about to turn. He would sometimes walk by the guest house, his hands in his pockets, a deliberate, casual stroll. He wouldn't stop. He wouldn't speak. He would just glance towards my window, a smirk playing on his lips, a look of triumphant pity. It was a look that said, "See? I won. You are nothing." I would let my shoulders slump. I would turn away from the window as if the sight of him was too painful to bear. Inside I was taking notes. Every arrogant smirk, every extravagant purchase, every public display was a nail he was hammering into his own coffin. He thought he was burying me, but he was only digging his own grave. The nights were the hardest and the most productive. The darkness provided a different kind of cover. While the main house blazed with light and echoed with laughter and music, my small guest house was dark and silent. This is when the ghost of Lillian Sterling would recede, and Lillian Vance would emerge. I sat with a single lamp, my father's old leather-bound journal open on my lap. I reread the passages he had written when he set up the trust, his fierce protective love for me pouring from the pages. He had seen something in Richard, a flicker of weakness or ambition that he didn't trust. "He is a salesman, my dear," he had written. "He can sell himself, his ideas, his charm. Make sure he never has the chance to sell you." I had forgotten that warning. I had fallen for the salesman's pitch for 45 years. No more. My phone, a simple, older model Richard probably assumed I barely knew how to use, became my lifeline. I had one contact in it that he knew nothing about. Anya Sharma. I found her through an old acquaintance from my university days, a woman who had gone on to become a federal judge. I had called her from a payphone at a gas station during one of my first, feigned shuffling walks around the neighborhood, my heart hammering against my ribs. My friend's recommendation was unequivocal. "She's a shark, Lillian," she had said. "A brilliant, tenacious shark. And right now you need a shark." My clandestine trips to her office were planned with military precision. I established a routine of taking a slow, painful-looking walk every other morning at 10 o'clock sharp. For my health, I told the maid. I would walk the 2 blocks to the end of our manicured street, turn the corner, and a nondescript black sedan would be waiting for me. The first time I got in, I was trembling, terrified of being seen. But Richard and Chloe were never awake at 10 in the morning. Their days started at noon with brunch and mimosas. They were so confident in their victory, so certain of my defeat, that they had stopped watching me. It was their greatest mistake. The moment I stepped into Anya Sharma's office, the frail, broken woman was left in the car. Her office was on the 30th floor of a downtown skyscraper, a space of cool glass, steel, and white orchids. It was minimalist, modern, and radiated a quiet, lethal competence. Just like Anya herself. She was a woman in her late 30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a mind that moved faster than anyone I had ever met. She dressed in impeccably tailored suits and wasted no words. "Good morning, Lillian," she would say, not with pity, but with a brisk respect that was like a balm to my wounded soul. "Let's get to work." Our sessions were intense. We spread documents across a vast glass conference table that overlooked the city. Anya had already obtained a copy of the original, unamended trust charter from the bank's vault, the one with the codicil my father had so presciently added. That codicil was our atomic bomb. The language is ironclad, Anya said, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on the key paragraph. Should the trustee, Richard Sterling, transfer, gift, or otherwise assign any assets from this trust to an heir not of the direct bloodline of Lillian Vance Sterling without her express, notarized and contemporaneous written consent, his role as trustee is immediately and irrevocably terminated. All assets, rights, and titles revert to the sole and exclusive control of the primary beneficiary, Lillian Vance Sterling. She looked at me, a rare, thin smile on her lips. He didn't just break the rule, Lillian. He shattered it. The moment he moved that $15 million into a trust for his illegitimate son, he triggered the self-destruct sequence. He just doesn't know it yet. And so we began assembling the pieces. We worked with a methodical, relentless focus. Anya's team filed the emergency ex parte petition with the court. It was a thick document, detailing Richard's betrayal, his coercion, the emotional distress, and the blatant violation of his fiduciary duty. We cited the codicil as the primary cause for action. We requested a hearing to have the petition sealed, so Richard would have no warning. Next, we prepared the freeze orders. This was my contribution. For 45 years, I had been the silent architect of our finances. I knew every account, every investment, every line of credit. Richard thought he was the master of our universe, but he had only ever seen the surface. I was the one who understood the foundations. There's the main brokerage account with Goldman Sachs, I told Anya, my voice low and steady. Account number 732B881. Then there are the 3 smaller investment accounts with Morgan Stanley. He has a personal checking and savings with Chase Private Client. 2 American Express Centurion cards, one in his name, one in mine, which he canceled. A Visa Infinite. A line of credit at the country club. The mortgage is paid off, but there's a home equity line of credit against the main house that he's been drawing on. He thinks it's his money. It's not. I listed them all from memory. Anya's paralegal typed furiously, her eyes wide. We drew up orders for every single financial institution. The moment a judge signed off on our petition, these orders would be executed simultaneously. Richard's financial world would cease to exist in an instant. The most satisfying part was assembling the evidence of their hubris. We hired a young tech-savvy paralegal whose only job was to screenshot and archive every single one of Chloe's social media posts. We printed them out in high-resolution color and placed them in a thick binder labeled Exhibit B, Dissipation of Assets. There she was, posing with the new Maserati. Caption: New whip for the new life. Out with the old, in with the new. Blessed upgrade winning. There she was, wearing my emerald necklace, the one my father had given my mother on their wedding day. She wore it with a cocktail dress to a poolside lunch. Caption: A little sparkle for a sunny day. Some things just look better on a new neck. Winking face. There she was, filming a home makeover TikTok in my library. My treasured first editions tossed carelessly onto a pile on the floor, as she and a designer discussed new paint colors. Caption: This dusty old room is getting a major glow-up. Say bye-bye to grandma vibes. Home transformation, interior design, modern luxury. And there it was, the video that had first broken me, the one of my clothes being thrown into black trash bags. Spring cleaning, the caption chirped, followed by a skull emoji. We had the digital timestamp. We had the list of accounts that liked it, including my daughter Sarah. Every post was a gift. Every boastful, arrogant, cruel display was another piece of evidence. Another brick in the wall that was about to come crashing down on them. They were building our case for us, one smug selfie at a time. The final piece was the forensic accountant. Anya brought in a man named Mr. Davies, a quiet, unassuming man with spectacles and a mind like a steel trap. He took the bank records of the $15 million transfer and traced it. It took him less than a week to produce his report. He met with us in the conference room, laying out a series of charts and diagrams that showed the money's path. It was remarkably unsophisticated, he said, adjusting his glasses. Mr. Sterling moved the $15 million from your joint brokerage account to a newly created trust account. The trust was named the Leo Sterling Future Fund. However, the trust's founding documents give the trustees, Mr. Sterling and a Ms. Chloe Bell, Complete discretion to dissolve the trust or use the funds for their own management and living expenses. Furthermore, the money didn't stay there. Within 48 hours, $5 million was transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands under a shell corporation controlled by Ms. Bell. Another $2 million was used as a down payment on a condominium in Miami. The rest is being drawn from for personal expenses, cars, jewelry, parties. This isn't a trust for a child, Miss Sterling, he concluded, looking at me directly. This is a simple, greedy money grab. And it's laughably easy to prove. I sat there looking at the undeniable proof of their greed, and I felt a profound coldness settle over me. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something clearer, harder. It was the detached focus of an architect reviewing a flawed structure just before its demolition. I would return from those meetings, the black sedan dropping me at the corner. I would resume my shuffling walk, my shoulders stooped, my face a mask of weary sadness. I would re-enter my cage and sit by the window. I'd see Richard practicing his golf swing on the lawn, or Chloe directing a photo shoot by the pool. They lived in a world of loud, garish color, a world of noise and distraction. They had no capacity for silence, no taste for subtlety. They couldn't imagine that a war could be planned in whispers, that a revolution could be born in the quiet heart of a defeated old woman. They saw a ghost in the window and felt powerful. They had no idea they were looking at their executioner. From the guest house, the world had shrunk to the 5-inch screen of my phone. The tinny sound of a pop song I didn't recognize bled from the tiny speakers. A cheap imitation of the thumping bass. I could feel vibrating faintly through the floorboards from the main house. It was Chloe's housewarming party. Their housewarming party. In my home. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I propped the phone against a stack of books on the small desk, my teacup growing cold beside it. I was a ghost at my own wake, watching the usurpers dance on my grave. The live stream was a masterclass in modern vulgarity. Chloe, poured into a glittering gold dress that looked both expensive and cheap, was the center of it all. She held the phone, turning the camera on herself, her face a mask of practiced joy. Her lips, plumped with my money, formed a perfect O of feigned surprise as she panned across the crowd. "Oh my God, you guys. Look at everyone. We are so blessed," she squealed. Her voice pitched to a frequency that set my teeth on edge. The live chat on the side of the screen scrolled by in a blur of heart emojis and fawning comments. "Queen." One read. "You deserve it all," said another. I watched as she found Richard in the throng. He was holding a glass of champagne, his face flushed with a victory he hadn't earned. He looked younger tonight, or at least he was trying to. His suit was too tight, his smile too wide. He was performing the role of the self-made tycoon who had finally shed his dead weight for a newer, shinier model. He leaned in and kissed Chloe for the camera. A wet, performative smack that was all for show. The comments exploded. Couple goals. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my cold tea. Patience. My father had taught me that the most important part of any structure is the foundation. Richard's was built on sand, and the tide was coming in. They moved out to the grand patio, the one I had designed myself with Italian limestone and a view of the sunset over the old oaks. My oaks. The phone camera wobbled as Chloe followed Richard to a makeshift podium. The crowd of sycophants and hangers-on quieted, their faces turned up toward him like sunflowers to a false sun. Richard tapped the microphone, the feedback screeching for a moment. He laughed it off, a booming artificial sound. "Friends. Family," he began, his arm draped possessively around Chloe's bare shoulders. "Welcome. Welcome to our home. To our new beginning." He paused for applause which came on cue. For too long this house was quiet. Stagnant. But now, thanks to this incredible woman, he squeezed Chloe, who beamed. It's filled with life. With energy. With a future. My hand tightened around my teacup. He was erasing me. Not just divorcing me, but wiping away 45 years as if they were a smudge on a window. I was no longer a person, just a period of stagnation. In the live chat someone typed, "So happy he's finally free." Richard's voice swelled with magnanimity. "And this is just the start. This property is wonderful, but Chloe and we have bigger dreams. We need more space for our vision." He pointed out into the darkness beyond the manicured lawn. The estate next door just went on the market this morning. A beautiful 10-acre property. And I thought to myself, why not? Let's expand the compound. A wave of impressed gasps and whoops rippled through the crowd. Chloe's eyes went wide. Oh, Ricky, are you serious? She breathed into the microphone. The picture of a woman overwhelmed by her man's power and generosity. As serious as a heart attack, he chuckled, a poor choice of words for a man his age. In fact, why wait? The crowd roared. This was the kind of obscene, impulsive display of wealth they had come to see. This was the content. Richard pulled out his phone. His movements grand and theatrical. He was playing to the camera, to Chloe's hundreds of thousands of followers. He was cementing his new brand. The real estate agent sent over the wire instructions for the deposit an hour ago, he announced, tapping on his screen with a flourish. A simple $1 million earnest money deposit to lock it down before anyone else can. He held the phone up so the live stream could see the banking app, the long string of numbers. He was a king signing a decree. I leaned closer to my own phone, my heart a slow, steady drum against my ribs. The moment was here. The first domino. He pressed his thumb to the screen to authorize the transfer. He smiled, waiting for the confirmation checkmark. It didn't appear. His smile wavered just for a fraction of a second. He repositioned his thumb and pressed again, harder this time. Nothing. The loading icon just spun and spun. A flicker of something crossed his face. Not panic yet. Annoyance. Impatience. The Wi-Fi out here on the patio must be spotty. He turned to Chloe, his smile a little strained. Signal's weak out here. Let me just. He tapped the screen again. A little more frantically this time. The crowd was still buzzing, oblivious. But Chloe, standing next to him, saw it. Her own smile tightened at the edges. I saw her whisper something to him. On the live stream you could hear his reply. A low hiss that the phone's microphone picked up with perfect clarity. It's not the signal. It says verification failed. He cleared his throat and turned back to the crowd, forcing a laugh. Ah, the bank's fraud department. They see a number with that many zeros and they get a little nervous. Don't worry, folks. There's more than one way to do this. He was trying to save face, to wrestle the narrative back under his control. He swiped out of the banking app and pulled up a digital wallet linked to his Premier Black Metal credit card. The one with no theoretical limit. We'll just put the deposit on the card for now, he said, his voice a little too loud. He initiated the transaction, his thumb hovering over the final confirmation button. He glanced at Chloe, a flicker of reassurance in his eyes. He pressed down. A beat of silence. Then another. A small red notification banner appeared at the top of his screen. Card declined. He stared at it. He blinked. He must have thought he'd seen it wrong. Chloe's face, reflected in his phone screen, was a frozen mask of confusion. The party hadn't gone silent, but the quality of the noise had changed. The confident buzz had been replaced by a confused murmur. People were starting to notice that the magic trick wasn't working. Richard, sweating now under the patio lights, tried another card. A platinum one from a different bank. He didn't announce it this time. He just tapped furiously at the screen, his jaw clenched. I could almost feel his humiliation radiating through my phone. This was not part of the script. This was not the image of effortless power he was trying to project. Declined. The word appeared again, stark and unforgiving. He let out a small strangled sound. And then, as if delivered by a divine vengeful hand, a system-wide notification pushed through to his phone's home screen. It was from the Central Trust. The font was large, bold, and black. Large enough for the camera, still trained on his hands, to pick up every single word. Access denied. All accounts frozen. The blood drained from Richard's face. He looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Chloe stared at the screen, her mouth hanging slightly open. The carefully constructed reality they had built for their audience was shattering in real time. And at that exact moment, as if summoned by the words on the screen, a low hydraulic hum cut through the party's music. The massive iron gates at the end of the long winding driveway, The ones I had picked out 2 decades ago, swung silently open. Every head on the patio turned. The live stream camera swung around, catching the approaching headlights. A sleek black town car, the kind used for funerals and VIPs, rolled smoothly up the driveway. It moved with a solemn, inexorable purpose. It stopped just behind the fountain in the center of the motor court. The driver's side door opened, but no one got out. Instead, the rear passenger door opened. A single elegant leather-clad heel stepped onto the cobblestones. Then another. Anya Sharma emerged from the car. She was dressed in a razor-sharp charcoal suit, a stark and severe contrast to the glittering party attire of the guests. She held a leather briefcase in one hand. Her face was calm and passive, a mask of professional neutrality that was more terrifying than any expression of anger could ever be. She looked like a surgeon arriving to perform a difficult, but necessary amputation. And then behind her, another set of headlights appeared at the gate. A tow truck. It rumbled up the driveway, its yellow emergency lights flashing silently, casting long dancing shadows across the lawn. It was followed by another, and then another. A procession of hulking blue-collar beasts, arriving at this palace of white-collar crime to collect what was owed. The party was officially over. Anya Sharma walked not toward the front door, but directly onto the lawn, her heels sinking slightly into the soft grass. She didn't hurry. Her pace was deliberate, measured. The crowd on the patio parted for her, as if she were Moses and they were the Red Sea. Richard and Chloe were still standing at the podium, frozen, like statues in a crumbling museum. The phone in Chloe's hand was still broadcasting everything live to the world. Anya walked up the patio steps, her footsteps echoing in the sudden, profound silence. The music had died, cut off by a DJ who clearly understood that the mood had shifted. Anya stopped a few feet from Richard. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. In the quiet, her words carried with the chilling clarity of a verdict. "Richard Sterling," she said, her voice even and calm. She opened her briefcase and removed a thick sheaf of documents. She handed them to him. His hand trembled as he took them. He didn't look at them. He was staring at her, his face a canvas of disbelief and dawning horror. "Pursuant to a court order issued this afternoon," Anya announced, her voice projecting clearly, a gift to the phone's microphone and the thousands of people watching, "and in accordance with the codicil of the Lillian Vance Sterling Trust, your authority as trustee has been immediately and irrevocably terminated." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Richard swayed on his feet. Anya continued, her tone unchanging, clinical. "The codicil, added by Lillian's father, specified that any attempt to transfer trust assets to a non-bloodline heir without the notarized, written consent of the primary beneficiary, Lillian, would constitute a terminal breach of fiduciary duty." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Your transfer of $15 million to a trust for Leo Miller was that breach. You triggered the kill switch yourself, Richard." She let him process that for a moment. The king was naked, the architect of his own demise. "As of 5 p.m. today," Anya stated, "all assets held by the trust, including this property, its contents, all subsidiary accounts, investments and vehicles, have reverted to the sole and exclusive control of our client, Lillian Sterling." A low moan escaped Chloe's lips. Her face, caked in makeup, had gone the color of ash. The live chat was a waterfall of frantic text. It was no longer hearts and praise. It was question marks, skull emojis, and the word "what?" typed over and over again. But Anya wasn't finished. She turned her cool, dispassionate gaze to Chloe, who flinched as if she'd been physically struck. "Ms. Miller," Anya said, the formal address a deliberate insult. "That $15 million, which was illegally and fraudulently transferred into a trust for your son, is now subject to an immediate and aggressive clawback order. You will be sued for its full return, plus damages." Anya's eyes flickered down to the diamond necklace sparkling at Chloe's throat, then to the designer handbag dangling from her arm. "I suggest you don't spend any of it." Chloe's phone slipped from her numb fingers, clattering onto the limestone. But it landed face up, the camera still live, now broadcasting a skewed, chaotic view of the scene, Anya's sharp suit, Richard's collapsing face, and the tow truck drivers who had now reached the motor court and were beginning their work with quiet efficiency. One driver was attaching a hook to the front of Chloe's brand new, canary yellow Porsche. Another was maneuvering his rig toward Richard's gleaming black Mercedes. The sounds were mundane, industrial, the clank of metal, the whine of a winch, but in this context, they were the sounds of an empire being dismantled. The guests, my former friends, were backing away, melting into the shadows, not wanting to be associated with the spectacular implosion. They were rats deserting a sinking ship. Richard finally looked down at the papers in his hand, his eyes scanning the first page. A broken, strangled noise came from his throat. "No," he whispered. "No, this can't be." "It is," Anya said, her voice devoid of pity. "You built your entire life inside a beautiful cage owned by your wife. You just forgot she was the only one holding the key." With that, she turned, her work done. She walked back across the lawn, got into the back of the town car, and was driven away, leaving behind the ruin she had orchestrated. The live stream was still running, a testament to the disaster, broadcasting the sight of Chloe's sports car being hoisted into the air, its wheels spinning uselessly. Chloe just stood there, white-faced and mute, watching her entire future being towed away. Richard had crumpled onto a patio chair, an old, defeated man in an expensive suit, holding the legal papers that had just ended his life. In the guest house, I reached out and ended the stream. The screen went black. The silence in my small room was absolute. I picked up my teacup. The tea was stone cold, but I drank it anyway. It was the most satisfying thing I had ever tasted. The sound of the tow truck engines was the overture to my new life. He hadn't stolen my future. He had just finally unlocked my cage. I took a slow breath, the cool night air feeling clean for the first time in weeks. From the guest house window, I had watched the climax of the show. I had seen Anya's car pull up, seen the tow trucks arrive like metallic vultures, and seen the live stream feed on my tablet flicker and die. Now it was time to walk back into my own home. I opened the door and stepped out. The manicured lawn was a mess, littered with abandoned champagne flutes and crushed canapes. The sounds were no longer of boisterous music and fake laughter, but of car doors slamming and tires squealing on the gravel driveway. The guests were fleeing. They weren't just leaving a party, they were scrambling away from a disaster, like rats abandoning a ship that had not only hit an iceberg but had been publicly scuttled by its own captain. I walked through the grand double doors that Chloe had so often posed in front of. Inside, the chaos was more intimate. A half-eaten plate of artisanal cheese sat on a table, a slice of brie melting under the heat of a forgotten lamp. The air was thick with the ghost of expensive perfume and the faint sour smell of spilled ambition. And in the center of it all, Richard stood. He wasn't the titan of industry, the political heavyweight I had helped create. He was just a man in a ridiculously expensive suit that now hung on him like a shroud. His shoulders were slumped, his face a pasty gray, his eyes vacant as they stared at the phone in his hand. The screen was dark. There were no more notifications, no more congratulatory texts. There was nothing. He finally looked his 72 years. Not distinguished or powerful, just old, small, defeated. He saw me approaching, and for a moment, a flicker of the old arrogance sparked in his eyes, a reflexive instinct to command, to dismiss. But it died as quickly as it came, smothered by the crushing weight of his new reality. He had nothing. He had wagered my life's work, our life's work, on a cheap thrill and lost everything. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. What could he possibly say? The story didn't just break. It detonated. It was a national scandal, a perfect storm of wealth, betrayal, and public humiliation. It was too delicious for the media to resist. His political career, so carefully constructed over decades, was incinerated overnight. Donors pulled their funding. The party disavowed him. He became a pariah, a punchline on late-night talk shows. They called it the Sterling implosion. Chloe's downfall was even more spectacular in a way. Her influencer brand, built on a fantasy of effortless luxury, was ravaged by a tidal wave of mockery and vitriol. The comment sections on her old posts became digital monuments to her failure. She was no longer the savvy, aspirational siren. She was just Chloe, the failed gold digger. A meme. A cautionary tale whispered in Pilates classes and exclusive country clubs. The empire of glass and pixels she had built inside my home shattered, and the world saw her for what she was. A trespasser who had overstayed her welcome. I didn't have to lift a finger. They had built their stage in the full glare of the public eye, and now they were forced to play out their tragedy on it, for all to see. Few days later they came. David and Sarah. They didn't call first. They just appeared at the front door, looking like chastened children summoned to the principal's office. I had the staff show them into the formal sitting room, the one where Chloe had taken a ridiculously staged photo of herself pretending to read Tolstoy. I had spent the morning having the entire house professionally cleaned, airing out the lingering scent of cheap vanilla and desperation. I sat in my favorite armchair, a cup of Earl Grey steaming in my hands, and I waited. They walked in, hesitating on the threshold as if uncertain of their right to enter. They had my height, my late father's eyes, but their expressions were entirely their own, a practiced blend of remorse and defensiveness. "Mom," David began, his voice strained. We are so sorry." Sarah nodded, her eyes welling up with tears that I couldn't be sure were genuine. "We didn't know, Mom. I swear. Dad lied to us. He told us you were difficult, that you had agreed to the separation, and were just being stubborn about the details." She sniffled. "He painted such a convincing picture. A convincing picture. I thought of the countless pictures I had helped paint over the years to make their father look convincing. The perfect family portraits, the charity galas, the campaign rallies. I looked at my children, these two adults I had raised. They had stood by and watched their father publicly discard me like a piece of old furniture. They had watched him humiliate me at my own birthday party and said nothing. Sarah had even liked a video of my life being packed into trash bags. They didn't call. They didn't text. They waited until the dust had settled and it was clear who had won before coming to declare their allegiance. I took a sip of my tea, letting the silence stretch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list their failures. I simply looked at them, letting them see the quiet, unbreachable chasm that now lay between us. "Trust," I said, my voice calm and even, cutting through their rehearsed apologies. "Trust is not a family heirloom, passed down from one generation to the next. It is not an entitlement. It is earned. It is built moment by moment, choice by choice. And it is shattered in the same way." I placed my cup back on its saucer with a soft click. "You have a very long way to go." I didn't cast them out. They were still my children, and some part of me would always love them. But the door to my heart, once thrown wide open for them, was now closed. Perhaps, in time, they could learn the combination to the lock. But I would not be giving them the key. The naive, all-forgiving mother they had known was gone, and they were only just beginning to understand the woman who had taken her place. The following week, the silence in the house was no longer a void, but a presence. It was a comforting, healing quiet, filled only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall and the distant sound of birdsong. The garish, trendy furniture Chloe had ordered was gone, donated to a local theater company. My own classic, timeless pieces were back in their rightful places. The scent of Chloe's cheap perfume had finally been banished, replaced by the subtle notes of lemon oil and fresh flowers. This was my home again. Not just the structure but the feeling. One morning I sat in the sunroom, my laptop open on the table before me. For 45 years, my creativity had been channeled into Richard's life. Designing party themes, orchestrating social events, building a facade of effortless elegance. My own passions, my own talents had been packed away like winter clothes, stored in an attic of the mind. I navigated to a program I hadn't opened in decades, an architectural drafting software. The blank white digital canvas stared back at me. My fingers, a little stiff at first, found their way to the mouse, and I began to sketch. Lines became walls. Shapes became windows. I wasn't designing a mansion or a monument to ego. It was small. A studio. Just for me. I placed it on the edge of the property, on a gentle slope with an unobstructed view of the mountains. I gave it a slanted roof with a massive skylight, to let in the morning sun. I designed a wall of glass that opened onto a stone patio, A place where I could sit and feel the breeze. Inside there would be a drafting table, shelves for my books, a comfortable chair for reading, and a kiln for the pottery I'd always wanted to try. It was a space for Lillian Vance. Not Lillian Sterling, the politician's wife. Just Lillian. As the design took shape on the screen, a profound sense of peace settled over me. Richard had thought he was taking everything from me. In his greed and his arrogance, he believed he was stealing my golden years, leaving me with nothing but the ashes of a shared past. He didn't understand. He could never understand. He hadn't stolen my future. He had just finally unlocked my cage.